Taeho Kim stood at the viewing window of the transport shuttle, watching the massive space station grow larger against the backdrop of stars. The Galactic Archive Station was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in crystalline domes that caught and reflected light from the nearby sun. After 3 weeks of travel, he was finally here. "Stop looking so nervous," Nari Choi said from the seat beside him. She was reviewing data on her tablet, not bothering to look up. "They already think we're primitives. Looking scared will just confirm it." Taeho smiled slightly. Nari always knew how to cut through his anxiety with blunt truth. They had been research partners for 6 years now, ever since humanity had been granted limited access to Galactic Council space. Out of 8 billion humans on Earth, only 12 were allowed to work among the stars. Taeho still wasn't sure why he had been chosen. The shuttle docked with a soft thud. As they gathered their belongings, Taeho caught sight of their reflection in the polished wall. 2 humans, in simple gray uniforms, carrying worn equipment cases. Around them, other delegates wore flowing robes of living light, had skin that shifted colors with their moods, or bodies that barely looked solid at all. Humanity looked plain by comparison. The station's interior was beautiful beyond description. The walls seemed to be made of flowing water that held its shape, displaying images of 1,000 different worlds. The air itself hummed with translated conversations from hundreds of species. Taeho's universal translator struggled to keep up, feeding words directly into his ear. A tall, slender being approached them. Its skin was pale gray, its eyes large and dark. Counselor Vexra, the exhibition curator. Taeho had seen his picture in the briefing materials. "The humans have arrived," Vexra said. His voice held a tone that Taeho couldn't quite identify. Amusement, perhaps. "We were beginning to think your species had gotten lost. The exhibition hall is quite easy to find, even for newcomers." Nari's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Taeho gave a polite nod. "Thank you for inviting us, Counselor. It's an honor to attend." Taeho. "Yes, well. Your government was quite insistent." Vex returned and began walking. "Do try to keep up. And please, touch nothing. Some of these artifacts are older than your entire civilization." They followed him through corridors filled with other delegates. Taeho noticed how the crowds parted for Vex Ra, but closed up again. When he and Nari tried to follow, more than once, someone bumped into them, not bothering to apologize. A being that looked like walking crystal actually sneered at them. "Ignore it," Nari whispered. "We're here for the artifacts, not to make friends." The exhibition hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high it seemed to touch the stars themselves. Display cases floated in the air, each one surrounded by small crowds. Inside, the cases were objects that made no sense to Taeho's eyes. Weapons that seemed to be made of frozen light, tools that existed in more dimensions than he could see. Fragments of machines that still hummed with power after thousands of years. These were artifacts of the architects. The legendary civilization that had vanished 50,000 years ago, leaving behind technology that even the most advanced modern species couldn't fully understand. Every child in the galaxy grew up hearing stories about them. They were the beginning, the first great civilization, the ones who had reached heights no one else had matched. "Magnificent, aren't they?" a voice said beside Taeho. He turned to see a reptilian being with golden scales. The being's badge identified him as a SAR scientist. "My people have studied the architects for 3,000 years. We still barely understand their most basic tools. They must have been remarkable," Taeho said carefully. "Remarkable." The SAR laughed. A hissing sound. "They were gods compared to us, and certainly gods compared to your kind." He moved away before Taeho could respond. Nari touched his arm. "Don't let them get to you. Come on, let's look at the displays." They moved through the hall, stopping at various cases. Each artifact had a description in the common galactic language, which Taeho's translator converted to Korean. Most of the descriptions were vague. Purpose unknown. Function uncertain. Origin architect. Tomb. World. Karak. 5. After an hour of viewing, the lights in the hall dimmed. A voice echoed through the space, speaking in the formal tones of a major announcement. Honored delegates, we now present the centerpiece of this exhibition, an artifact recovered only 6 months ago from the deepest vault of Karak 5. It has never been displayed publicly before. We present the Void Render. A platform rose from the floor in the center of the hall. Everyone pushed forward to see. Tejo and Nari were swept along with the crowd, ending up closer to the front than they expected. On the platform sat a weapon. At least, Tejo assumed it was a weapon. It was about a meter long, shaped like no gun or blade he had ever seen. The material looked like crystal, but it flowed and shifted as though it were liquid. Colors moved through it in patterns that hurt to watch for too long. Just looking at it made Tejo feel strange, like the weapon existed slightly outside of normal space. Beautiful, someone whispered nearby. Counselor Vexra stood beside the platform. This artifact represents the pinnacle of architect technology. Our best scientists estimate it could destroy a small moon with a single discharge. The power source is unknown. The method of operation is unknown. It has never been activated since we discovered it 50,000 years ago. Tejo found himself drawn to the weapon. He pushed a bit closer, wanting to see the details. The crystal surface seemed to have patterns etched into it, though they shifted too quickly to read. The inscriptions on the weapon are in 17 different languages, Vexra continued. All of them dead languages that predate any modern civilization. Our linguists have been working to translate them. Most appear to be warnings or operating instructions. Tejo was now at the front of the crowd, only a few meters from the platform. The weapon seemed to pulse with an inner light. Without thinking, he took another step forward. The weapon flared with brilliant light. The crowd gasped and stepped back. Tejo froze, afraid he had broken some rule by getting too close. But the weapon wasn't attacking. Instead, holographic text appeared in the air around it, spinning slowly. The characters were in the dead languages Vexra had mentioned, flowing past too quickly to read. Then the spinning stopped. The text rearranged itself, and at the bottom, in letters that glowed brighter than all the rest, words appeared in 2 languages that Tejo recognized instantly, Korean and English, his own languages. The text was simple and clear. Property of Commander Tejo Kim, United Earth Defense Force, serial number 4477, TK. The hall went completely silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at Tejo. He stood frozen, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was impossible. This weapon was 50,000 years old. Earth didn't have a defense force with that name. He had never been a commander. He had never seen this weapon before in his life. How? Vexra's voice cracked. He stared at Tejo with wide eyes. How did you do that? I didn't do anything, Tejo said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. I was just looking. A Tsar security officer pushed through the crowd, followed by several others. The one with golden scales that Tejo had spoken to earlier pointed at him. That human. He activated it. He must be a thief. Or a saboteur. I didn't touch it, Tejo said, raising his hands. Tejo didn't do anything wrong, Nari shouted, stepping in front of him. He was just standing here. But more security officers were arriving. The crowd was shouting now. Everyone talking at once. Some were scared, backing away. Others were angry, pointing at Tejo and demanding answers. The weapon continued to glow, the holographic text floating peacefully in the air, his name shining for everyone to see. Detain the human, Vexra said quietly. His face had gone from its normal gray to an almost white color. Detain both of them, and seal this hall. No one leaves until we understand what just happened. The security officers grabbed Taeho's arms. He didn't resist. What could he say? What could he do? His name was floating in the air, above a weapon that was older than human civilization. A weapon from a people who had vanished before Earth had built its first cities. As they dragged him toward the exit, Taeho looked back at the weapon one more time. The crystal surface pulsed with light, almost like a heartbeat, and for just a moment, he could have sworn it felt familiar, like seeing the face of an old friend he had somehow forgotten. The last thing he heard before the doors closed was Nari shouting his name, and the confused roar of hundreds of voices all asking the same question. How could a human's name be written on an architect weapon? The detention cell was small and white, with walls that seemed to glow with their own light. Taeho sat on the single bench, his head in his hands. They had taken everything from him. His tablet, his research notes, even his watch. He had no idea how long he had been here. Hours. Certainly. Maybe a full day. The door opened with a soft hiss. Azar entered, his scales a deep red color that seemed to shift to orange when the light caught them. He was tall, nearly 2 meters, with eyes that looked at Taeho like he was examining an insect. "I am Inquisitor Krell," the Tsar said, his voice harsh. "I investigate crimes against the Galactic Council. You are in serious trouble, human." "I didn't do anything," Taeho said. He had said the same thing to the guards who brought him here. But they hadn't listened either. "You activated an architect artifact. That weapon has sat dormant for 50,000 years. Then you walk into the room, and suddenly your name appears on it." Krell sat down across from Taeho, his tail curling around his feet. "So either you can explain how that happened, or I will assume you are part of some human conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" Taeho shook his head. "There are only 12 humans allowed in council space. What kind of conspiracy could we possibly run? That is what I intend to find out." Krell pulled out a device that looked like a smooth, black stone. "This will scan your biology. It will tell me if you have been modified, if you carry any hidden technology, if you are even truly human." The scan felt like nothing. Krell passed the stone over Taeho's body, watching a display that only he could see. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. "You are completely baseline human. No modifications, no implants, no genetic engineering." Krell sounded almost disappointed. "Your DNA is so pure, it's almost primitive." "I could have told you that," Taeho said quietly. The interrogation went on for hours. Krell asked the same questions in different ways. Where was Taeho born? Seoul. On Earth. Had he ever been to Karak 5? No, humans weren't allowed on Architect Tomb worlds. Did he know anything about the architects? Only what everyone knew, from basic history. Had he ever seen the weapon before? Never. Finally, Krell stood up. "You will remain here while we investigate further. If you are lying to me, human, I will discover it. And when I do, your entire species will pay the price." After Krell left, Taeho lay down on the bench and stared at the ceiling. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. His name on that weapon, written in Korean and English, languages that didn't exist 50,000 years ago. The architects had vanished when humanity was still living in caves, hunting with stone tools. He must have fallen asleep. Because the next thing he knew, the door was opening again. But this time it wasn't Krell. It was a small maintenance robot, barely half a meter tall. It rolled into the cell and stopped in front of him. "Taeho Kim," the robot said in a mechanical voice. "Message from Nari Choi. Do not react. They are watching." Taeho froze, then forced himself to relax. He sat up slowly, as if just waking up. The robot continued in the same flat voice. "I am delivering nutrition supplements to all detainees." It extended a tray with a cup of something that looked like gray paste. "The inscription on the weapon is not from the past. It is from your future." Taeho took the cup with shaking hands. What? He whispered. Do not speak. Listen only. The robot's voice didn't change at all. Dr. Yuna Park has analyzed the linguistic markers in the Korean and English text, the dialect, the grammar patterns, the word choice. They match projections for Korean and English as they will be spoken 200 years from now. Not as they are spoken today. Not as they were spoken in the past. The future. The robot turned and rolled toward the door. Nari Choi is working to prove your innocence. Trust the evidence. Trust the science. Then, it was gone. Taeho sat holding the cup, his mind racing. From the future? How could writing from the future be on something from the past? Unless, he couldn't complete the thought. It was too big, too impossible. Meanwhile, in a research lab on another level of the station, Nari was working faster than she had ever worked in her life. The station authorities had not detained her, but they were watching her closely. She knew she had limited time. Dr. Yuna Park's face filled the communication screen. She was on Earth, 9 light-years away. But quantum communication made the conversation instant. The older woman looked tired, her gray hair messy. Show me the inscription again, Yuna said. Nari displayed the holographic recording she had managed to take before security sealed the hall. The text floated in the air, rotating slowly. Taeho's name glowed in Korean and English. Yuna studied it for a long time. The particle usage is all wrong for modern Korean, she said finally. See here? This grammatical construction. We don't use it anymore. Replaints without, but linguistic models predict it will come back into fashion in about 150 years. And this English word, it's spelled in a way that doesn't match any current dialect. So, it's not just Korean and English, Nari said. Exactly. Yuna leaned closer to her screen. Nari, do you understand what this means? That weapon was made 50,000 years ago, but the inscription was written in a language that won't exist for another 2 centuries. It's a time paradox, Nari whispered. Or something else entirely. Yuna's expression was grim. I've been looking at the other inscriptions on the weapon. The 17 dead languages. I found something interesting. 3 of them have markers that suggest they descended from Korean and English, like how French and Spanish descended from Latin. Nari felt cold. 5 days ago, I would have agreed with you. But now, we have Taeho's name on an architect weapon. I don't think we can say anything is impossible anymore. The communication ended when station security entered the lab. Counselor Vex Ra was with them, his gray face looking even paler than before. Miss Choi, he said formally. We need your expertise. The weapon continues to display anomalous behavior. It will only respond to human presence now. We need to understand why. Why? They brought Nari to the sealed exhibition hall. The weapon sat on its platform, surrounded by scanning equipment and nervous scientists. When Nari entered, the crystal surface brightened slightly. It does this whenever a human approaches, one of the scientists explained. She was a tall gray like Vexra, but younger. We've tested with 70 different species. Only humans generate this response. Nari walked closer. The weapon pulsed with light, the holographic text appearing again. Her breath caught. There was new text now, below Taeho's name. Text that hadn't been there before. Secondary authorization. Engineer, Nari Choi. United Earth Defense Force. Serial number, 5523, NC. Oh no, Nari whispered. Vexra stared at her. Your name? It's adding human names. We need to run every test possible, the young scientist said excitedly. Genetic analysis? Temporal scans? Dimensional mapping? This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Over the next 3 days, Nari was subjected to the same scans as Taeho. The results were identical. Completely baseline human. No modifications. No hidden technology. just an ordinary person from Earth, but the weapon recognized her. Just as it recognized Taeho, on the fourth day, Inquisitor Krell brought Taeho to the exhibition hall. Taeho looked tired, his clothes rumpled from sleeping in them. When he saw Nari, relief flooded his face. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine. Are you?" Before he could answer, Krell pushed him toward the weapon. "Activate it," the Tsar commanded. "I don't know how," Taeho said. "Touch it. Try to use it. Do something." Slowly, Taeho reached out his hand. His fingers came within a centimeter of the crystal surface. The weapon flared so brightly that everyone had to look away. When the light faded, the weapon had changed. Parts of it had unfolded, revealing a grip that looked perfectly sized for a human hand. Holographic displays appeared in the air, showing what looked like targeting information and power levels. The weapon was active. Fully active. For the first time in 50,000 years. Estimated destructive capacity, a scientist read from her scanner, her voice shaking. Equivalent to 700 nuclear warheads. Power source. Unknown. Still unknown. It's drawing energy from somewhere, but we can't detect the source. Taeho pulled his hand back quickly. The weapon stayed active. Vexra approached slowly, staring at the weapon with something like fear. In all the history of the Galactic Council, we have recovered thousands of architect artifacts. Maybe a dozen have ever activated, and those only partially. This is complete activation. Full functionality. He looked at Taeho. "Who are you?" "Really? I'm just a xenoarchaeologist from Earth," Taeho said. "I don't understand this any more than you do." "Then, perhaps," said a new voice, "we should look at what we do understand." Everyone turned. A holographic figure had appeared in the center of the room. It looked vaguely humanoid, but made of pure light. When it spoke, the words bypassed the universal translators entirely, speaking directly into everyone's mind. "I am Keeper Sona," the figure said. "I am the custodian of the archive station. I have maintained these records for 80,000 years, and I have been waiting for this day for 50,000 of those years." "Waiting?" Vexra whispered. "You knew this would happen?" "I was told it would happen, by the architects themselves, before they vanished." Sona turned to look at Taeho. "They left me a message, instructions to be followed when a human activated the void render. They told me this human would need to see the forbidden archives." "The forbidden archives are sealed," Krell protested. "They contain causality-violating information. Opening them could damage the timeline itself." "Yes," Sona agreed. "But the architects believed the damage was necessary. They believed the truth was more important than the paradox." The AI extended a hand of light toward Taeho. "Will you come with me, Taeho Kim? Will you learn why your name is written on a weapon from a lost civilization?" Taeho looked at Nari. She nodded slightly. He turned back to Sona. "Yes," he said. The forbidden archives existed in a part of the station that Taeho hadn't known was there. Keeper Sona led him and Nari through corridors that seemed to fold in on themselves, passing through doorways that appeared only when the AI approached them. Counselor Vexra and Inquisitor Krell followed at a distance, neither willing to be left behind. "These archives are sealed under council law," Krell said for the third time. "Opening them requires approval from all 300 member species. The architects built this station," Sona replied calmly. "Their authority supersedes the council. It always has. You simply chose to forget that fact." They entered a chamber that seemed impossibly vast, stretching away into darkness in all directions. Floating in the void were countless data cores, each one glowing with soft light. Some looked like crystals, others like spheres of liquid metal. Still others, like things that hurt to look at directly. "These are memories," Sona explained. "Records that predate most modern civilizations. Information that the architects deemed too dangerous or too destabilizing to release. I have guarded them for 50,000 years, waiting for the right moment." The AI gestured. and one of the data cores floated down from the darkness. It was a perfect sphere of what looked like amber, with something dark frozen in the center. This core contains records from the final days of the architects. Before they vanished, they left detailed accounts of who they were and what they had done. Sona touched the sphere, and it began to glow. Watch. Learn. Understand. The chamber filled with light. And suddenly, Teho was somewhere else. He stood on a planet he didn't recognize. The sky was green, and 2 moons hung overhead. Around him, a city spread out. Buildings that looked grown rather than built. Their surfaces shifting and alive. And walking through the city were people, humans. "This is impossible," Vexra whispered. His voice seemed to come from very far away. The architects were not human. The records clearly state they were a unique species, unlike any other. NF. The architects were Warner. NF. "Keep watching," Sona said. The vision changed. Now Teho stood in what looked like a military command center. Holographic displays showed star maps and battle formations. And sitting at the central console was a woman in a uniform. The uniform had a patch on the shoulder. United Earth Defense Force. "Captain Hyun Seo, status report," said a voice. The woman looked up, and Teho could see she had been crying. "We lost the colony at Proxima. The breach is expanding faster than our models predicted. If we can't stop it, it will reach Earth within 5 years. The time bridge is ready," another voice said. "We can evacuate now." "Evacuate to where?" Captain Hyun-seo stood, her hands clenched into fists. "There's nowhere in this time that's safe. The breach will consume everything. Every world, every star, every living thing. Not in this time," the other voice agreed. "But 50,000 years ago? The breach doesn't exist then. We send everyone back. We rebuild. We survive." The vision shifted again. Teho saw massive ships, larger than anything he had ever imagined, filling the orbit of Earth. Not his Earth, a future Earth, with cities that touched the clouds and oceans that had been turned into farmland. "The evacuation is complete," a man's voice echoed through the vision. 3 million personnel. 2 million civilians. Everyone who volunteered to go back. Everyone who chose survival over the certainty of death. And the time bridge will collapse once the last ship goes through. We can't risk the breach following us into the past. The timeline will seal behind us. We'll be stranded 50,000 years ago, with no way back. "Good," Captain Hyun Seo said. She stood on the bridge of one of the massive ships, looking out at Earth one last time. "Send the word. All ships, jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Jump." The vision went white. When it cleared, Teho saw the same ships, but now they orbited a planet with a blue sky and a single yellow sun. The planet was covered in forests and oceans. Primitive. Untouched. "Is that Earth?" Nari whispered. "Our Earth?" "Earth as it was 50,000 years ago," Sona confirmed. "Before civilization. Before agriculture. Before humans had even discovered writing." 1. The vision continued. Teho watched as the future humans of the United Earth Defense Force landed on the ancient planet. He watched them build the first settlements, not on Earth itself, but on other worlds, in other systems. Watched them encounter primitive species and carefully, slowly, begin to share their knowledge. "They uplifted us," Vexra said, his voice hollow. "The architects uplifted my people. We were barely sentient when they found us. They taught us language, gave us technology, helped us reach the stars. They uplifted everyone," Sona said. 300 species across the galaxy. The architects spent 30,000 years traveling the stars, finding primitive life and nurturing it. They built the foundation of what would become the Galactic Council. They gave their knowledge freely, asking nothing in return. "But why?" Krell asked. Why would they do that? The vision showed Captain Hyun-so, now much older, her hair gray. She stood in front of a gathering of different species, all of them young and new to the stars. Because we remember what it was like to be alone, she said to the assembled aliens. We remember facing extinction with no one to help us. We remember the fear and the desperation, so we make sure you never have to feel that way. We make sure that when you reach for the stars, there are friends waiting to take your hand. The vision shifted one more time. Now Taeho saw a massive structure being built in space, something that looked like a ring of twisted light. The breach has found us, a voice said. Taeho recognized it as Captain Hyun-so, though he couldn't see her. She sounded very old now. Very tired. Even 50,000 years in the past. It's coming. The dimensional walls are weakening. We have maybe 10 years before it breaks through. If we could run again, someone suggested. Jump further back. No. The timeline is too fragile already. Another jump, and we risk destroying causality itself. Hyun-so paused. We have to end this. We have to seal the breach permanently, even if it costs us everything. The timeline collapse. Another voice said. If we do this, we'll be erased. All of us. The architects will cease to exist. The species we uplifted will remain, but they'll have no memory of us. We'll become myths, legends, mysteries they can't solve. Better that than letting the breach destroy them all, Hyun-so said firmly. We didn't come 50,000 years into the past just to watch everything die anyway. We came to save the future, even if that future doesn't remember us. Taeho watched as the humans, the architects, built their final weapon, a device that would collapse the dimensional boundaries, sealing the breach forever. But the price was everything they were. Their existence would be written out of the timeline, leaving only their works behind. They did it, Sona said quietly as the vision showed the device activating. They erased themselves from history to save everyone else. The collapse should have removed all traces of them, but before they activated it, they did something clever. The vision showed a younger Captain Hyun-so standing in a laboratory. Around her were genetic samples, carefully stored and labeled. We seed the timeline, she said to the scientists with her. We take our DNA and scatter it across multiple worlds. Not enough to change those worlds' evolution. Just enough to leave markers. And on Earth, our original home, we leave the most. We ensure that in 50,000 years, when humanity evolves naturally, they'll carry our genetic code. They'll be our descendants. But they won't know. One of the scientists said. They'll evolve on their own. Develop on their own. They'll think they're ordinary. And, until the right moment, Hyun-so agreed. Until one of them touches an architect artifact and the genetic markers activate, then they'll remember. Or rather, they'll begin the process of remembering what they never knew in the first place. The vision faded. Taeho stood in the archives again, his mind reeling. Beside him, Nari had tears running down her face. We're the architects, she whispered. Humans. We're the architects. You are their descendants, Sona corrected gently. The architects erased themselves from the timeline, but they made sure their legacy continued through you. Modern humanity carries their genetic code, scattered across your population. Most humans will never activate it, but some, like you, Taeho, like you, Nari, have a higher concentration of the markers. Is that why the weapon recognized us? Taeho asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. The weapon recognized you because, in a very real sense, you built it. Not you personally, but your genetic ancestors, 50,000 years ago. And because of the timeline collapse, you will build it. You are building it. Time has become non-linear, where the architects are concerned. Vexra sat down heavily on the floor, his gray face showing shock. This is impossible. We have records going back 40,000 years. Nothing in our history mentions humans as the architects. Because the architects ensured you wouldn't remember, Sona said. The timeline collapse was specifically designed to erase their existence while preserving their works. They became the greatest mystery in the galaxy, exactly as they intended. Better to be forgotten than to be worshipped. Better to be a mystery than to rob the uplifted species of their own sense of achievement. Krell was pacing, his tail lashing. If this is true, if humans are the descendants of the architects, then everything we know is wrong. Our entire history, our understanding of our place in the galaxy. Not wrong, Sona said. Incomplete. The architects wanted you to stand on your own. They didn't want you to feel inferior or dependent. So they removed themselves from the equation. Tejo looked at the AI. You said you've been waiting for this day. Why now? Why did they want us to know now? Because the loop must close, Sona replied. In approximately 180 years, Earth will develop time bridge technology. The breach will appear, and people like you, Tejo, people like you, Nari, will have to make a choice. Will you go back? Will you become the architects, knowing you will be erased from history? Knowing you will sacrifice everything to save species that don't exist yet? That's insane, Nari said. You're telling us our future is already written? No. I'm telling you that your future has already happened. But it only happened because you chose it. Because 50,000 years ago, Captain Hyun Seo and 3 million others chose to save the future instead of themselves. Sona's light flickered. The genetic markers in your DNA are activating, Tejo. Soon, you will begin to remember things you never learned. Skills you never trained for. Knowledge that doesn't belong to you, yet feels completely natural. You are becoming who you always were. Who you will be. Who you are. Tejo looked at his hands. They looked the same as always. But deep inside, he could feel something changing. Like a door opening in his mind, showing him rooms he hadn't known existed. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now, Sona said, the galaxy learns the truth, and humanity must decide what to do with a legacy they never knew they had. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a space designed to humble anyone who entered it. The ceiling was a display of real-time images from across the galaxy, showing 300 different homeworlds rotating slowly above. Around the circular floor, representatives from each species sat in sections marked with their world's symbol. At the center of it all stood a single platform, where those called to speak would present their case. Tejo stood on that platform now, with Nari beside him. They both wore their simple gray uniforms, looking painfully ordinary compared to the elaborate clothing and forms of the species around them. Ambassador Jiho Han stood with them, an older man with white hair who served as Earth's primary representative to the council. He looked tired and worried. Let me do most of the talking, Jiho whispered. I've been dealing with council politics for 15 years. You just answer their questions honestly. The news had spread across the galaxy in the 3 days since the archives were opened. Humanity's connection to the architects was now public knowledge. The reaction had been swift and chaotic. Some species celebrated, calling for humanity to be welcomed fully into the council. Others were angry, claiming this was human manipulation or fraud. Still others were afraid, worried about what it meant if primitive Earth was actually the homeworld of the legendary architects. A tone sounded, deep and resonant. The council was coming to order. This emergency session is called to address the matter of humanity and the architect legacy, announced the council speaker, a being made of living crystal whose voice echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Jiho Han of Earth, you have requested this hearing. Present your case. Jiho stepped forward, his posture straight despite his age. Honored Council, we come before you today not to claim superiority, but to share an uncomfortable truth. The evidence presented from the forbidden archives shows that humanity's genetic ancestors were the architects. We did not seek this knowledge. We are as surprised by it as you are. Surprised. The speaker from the Krell Empire rose, his red scales catching the light. It was Inquisitor Krell himself, now representing his government. Or is this the reveal of a long-planned deception? Humans appear in council space, barely 30 years ago, presenting yourselves as primitive newcomers. Now suddenly you claim to be the heirs of the greatest civilization in history? We claim nothing. Jiho replied calmly. The artifacts make the claim for us. Keeper Sona's archives provide the evidence. We simply ask that you judge the facts objectively. A representative from the Tall Greys stood. It was Counselor Vex Ra, who had changed significantly in the past 3 days. Where before he had been dismissive of humans, now he looked at them with something like wonder. I have reviewed the archives personally, Vexra said. I have seen the genetic analysis. I watched the historical records. The evidence is conclusive. The architects were human. Future humans, yes, displaced in time, but genetically identical to the humans we see before us today. Then they should have access to all architect technology immediately, said a delegate from a species that looked like living flowers. It is their inheritance. Their birthright. No! Several voices shouted at once. Well said, are weak. Just because ancient humans built those weapons doesn't mean modern humans deserve them, Krell argued. Look at Earth's history. War, violence, environmental destruction. They nearly killed themselves before they even reached space. Should we hand planet-destroying weapons to such a violent species? Teho felt Nari tense beside him. He put a gentle hand on her arm, keeping her quiet. Jiho had warned them. This would happen. The Krell Empire raises a valid concern, another delegate said. Humanity may be genetically descended from the architects, but they are not the architects. They did not earn this technology. They did not build this civilization. Should inheritance alone grant them such power? The debate went on for hours. Teho lost track of the different arguments. Some species wanted humanity elevated to a leadership position immediately. Others wanted humans banned from council space entirely. A few suggested putting Earth under protection, isolating humanity until they were mature enough to handle their legacy. Through it all, Teho stood quietly, feeling increasingly strange. The genetic markers Sona had mentioned were activating more strongly now. Sometimes when he looked at the holographic displays, he understood them without needing the translator. Sometimes, he found himself thinking in languages he had never learned. It was like having someone else's memories bleeding into his own mind. Finally, the council speaker called for order. We have heard many perspectives. Now we will hear from the human who activated the Void Render. Teho Kim, approach and speak. Teho walked to the center of the platform. 300 species watched him, waiting. His mouth felt dry. I'm just a xenoarchaeologist, he said quietly. I studied the architects because they fascinated me. Their technology, their mystery, the fact that they vanished without explanation. I never imagined I had any connection to them. Yet you activated their weapon, the speaker noted. Something no one else has accomplished in 50,000 years. Yeah, I didn't try to activate it. I just looked at it, and it responded. I still don't fully understand why. Teho paused, gathering his thoughts. But I've been thinking about what the archives showed us. The architects didn't conquer anyone. They didn't demand worship or tribute. They spent 30,000 years traveling the galaxy, finding primitive species, and helping them grow. They shared everything they had, asking nothing back. He looked around at the assembled species. And when they faced extinction, when the breach came even to the past they had fled to, they didn't run again. They erased themselves from existence to seal the threat. They chose to be forgotten if it meant you would survive. A noble sentiment, Krell said coldly. But those were different humans. They had already developed for thousands of years beyond where your Earth is now. They had wisdom you lack. Maybe, Tejo agreed. Or maybe they were just people who made a choice. The right choice. But still a choice. They weren't special because they were genetically superior or more advanced. They were special because they chose to care about others more than themselves. A new voice spoke up, young and excited. Tejo recognized her as Isul Yoon, a human historian who had arrived on a fast ship 2 days ago. She was only 26, brilliant, and apparently had no fear of the council. "If I may speak," Isul said, not waiting for permission. "I've been studying the patterns in architect ruins across the galaxy. They left markers. Subtle ones. Almost like breadcrumbs. Ruins placed in specific locations. Artifacts designed to survive millennia. Information encoded in ways that only someone looking for a pattern would find." "Your point?" the speaker asked. "They wanted us to find them." "Not immediately, but eventually. The architects planned for humanity to rediscover their legacy at the right time. When we were ready to understand it, to accept it, and to make the choice they made 50,000 years ago." Isul pulled up holographic data, showing patterns of architect sites across space and time. "Everything points to this moment. This is when the loop begins." The council chamber erupted in argument again. The speaker called for order repeatedly. Finally, a compromise was proposed by a coalition of moderate species. Tejo would be allowed to interface fully with the Architect Arsenal, the largest collection of their technology on the tomb world of Karak 5. If he could activate it, if he could demonstrate complete connection to the Architect legacy, it would prove the genetic link beyond any doubt. If he couldn't, humanity would be expelled from council space for fraud. "This is acceptable," Jiho said after a quick consultation with Tejo and Nari. "Then it is decided," the speaker announced. "In 7 days, we will travel to Karak 5. There, Tejo Kim will either prove humanity's claim or disprove it forever." That night, in their assigned quarters on the station, Nari confronted Tejo. "You can't do this," she said, pacing the small room. "I've been analyzing the timeline, the genetic markers, everything Sona told us. If you fully activate the arsenal, if you prove you're connected to the architects, the loop begins. You'll be locked into the destiny they created. You'll have to go back." "We don't know that," Tejo said, though even he didn't sound convinced. "Don't we?" Nari stopped pacing and looked at him directly. "The archives showed us what happens. In 180 years, the breach appears. Time bridge technology is developed. Someone goes back. Someone named Tejo Kim, apparently. The loop only works if you choose it." "Maybe I will choose it," Tejo said quietly. "Maybe that's not so bad. You'll be erased from history. You'll spend 30,000 years building a civilization for species that don't exist yet. And then you'll wipe yourself out of the timeline to save them. How is that not bad?" Tejo looked out the window at the stars. Captain Hyun So made that choice. 3 million people made that choice. They knew what it would cost, and they did it anyway. They were different people, from a different time. Were they? Tejo turned to face her. Or were they just humans who saw a problem too big to ignore? Who decided that some things are worth more than personal survival? Nari's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "The archives said you're in them too," Tejo reminded her gently. "Your name on the weapon, remember? Engineer Nari Choi. If this is destiny, we're in it together." Before Nari could respond, there was a knock at the door. Isul entered, carrying a data pad, and looking excited despite the late hour. "You need to see this," she said. "I've been going through the genetic data that the station collected from both of you. Your architect markers aren't unique. They're rare, but not unique." "What do you mean?" Tejo asked. "I mean there are probably hundreds, maybe thousands of humans on Earth who carry the same markers. You're not special in that regard. You're just the first to activate them." Isul pulled up genetic charts. "It's like the architects scattered seeds across humanity. Most will never germinate, but some will, given the right trigger, so others could activate architect technology too? Potentially. But here's the interesting part. Isul zoomed in on a specific genetic sequence. The markers aren't random. They're clustered in people with certain traits. Scientists, engineers, people who think about the future, who care about preservation and growth. They chose who would carry their legacy, Tejo realized. Not based on strength or power, but based on character. Exactly. The architects didn't want warriors to inherit their weapons. They wanted builders, protectors, people who would make the same choice they made when the time came. The three of them sat in silence for a while, contemplating what this meant. 7 days, Nari finally said. We have 7 days. Before Carrick 5. Before everything changes. Then let's make them count, Tejo replied. Because once we go to that tomb world, once I touch that arsenal, there's no going back. The loop will begin, and we'll have to decide if we're brave enough to close it. Carrick 5 hung in space like a dead thing. The planet's surface was gray and lifeless, covered in ruins that stretched across continents. This was the largest known architect tomb world, the place where they had made their final stand against the breach. From orbit, Tejo could see the massive structures that dotted the surface. Buildings the size of mountains that had stood untouched for 50,000 years. The fleet that had gathered to witness this moment was the largest assembly of ships in modern history. Every council species had sent representatives. The ship carrying Tejo, Nari, and the other humans was small compared to most, but it held the attention of everyone present. Final approach in 10 minutes, the pilot announced. Tejo stood in the observation deck, watching the planet grow larger. Beside him, Nari was quiet. They had talked little during the 7-day journey. What was there to say? They both knew what was coming. Are you scared? Nari asked finally. Terrified, Tejo admitted. But also curious. These genetic memories that have been surfacing, they're getting stronger. Sometimes I remember things that haven't happened yet. Or that happened 50,000 years ago. I'm not sure which. Person, what do you remember? Standing on this planet, working in those ruins, building something important. He paused, being happy, despite everything, knowing the work mattered. Ambassador Jiho joined them at the window. The older man looked like he hadn't slept in days. The council wants you to know, whatever happens down there, Earth stands with you. We've already seen the evidence. We know the truth. Even if the arsenal doesn't activate, we believe you. Thank you, Tejo said. That means a lot. The ship landed near the largest structure on the planet. A building that looked like a fusion of cathedral and fortress. The Arsenal Gate, as the records called it. The entrance to the greatest collection of architect technology ever found. As Tejo, Nari, and a select group of observers stepped off the ship, Tejo felt the planet itself respond. The ground beneath his feet hummed with energy. The air, thin and cold, seemed to warm slightly. It was welcoming him home. This is impossible, muttered one of the scientists, a tall gray who had been studying this planet for 20 years. The ruins have been dormant since we found them. Nothing we've tried has ever activated them. Maybe you weren't the right people, Isul said quietly. They walked toward the Arsenal Gate. It was massive, easily 50 meters tall, made of the same shifting crystal as the Void Render. Symbols covered its surface, flowing and changing like water. As Tejo approached, the symbols began to glow. Counselor Vexera, who had also come to witness, stepped forward. Tejo Kim, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we ask you to attempt full activation of the arsenal. If you succeed, it will prove beyond doubt your connection to the architects. If you fail, we will know the genetic link is insufficient for true inheritance. And if I succeed? Tejo asked. What happens to me? Vexera hesitated. We don't know. The archives were unclear on that point. Teho looked at Nari. She nodded, her face pale but determined. Then he turned to the gate and placed both hands on its surface. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded from the gate, spreading across the planet in waves. Every structure, every ruin, every piece of architect technology that had lain dormant for 50,000 years suddenly came to life. The planet itself seemed to wake up, systems activating in sequence, power flowing through channels that had been dry for millennia. And Teho's mind opened. He was no longer just himself. He was also Commander Teho Kim of the United Earth Defense Force, age 43, veteran of the Breach Wars. He remembered his training at the academy, remembered the day Earth's sun had flickered as the breach began to form, remembered the desperate decision to jump backward in time to save humanity by becoming something else. He remembered meeting Captain Hyun Seo, who would become the leader of the architects, remembered the 30,000 years of work, traveling from world to world, finding primitive species, and carefully, patiently helping them grow. Remembered the joy of seeing the first uplifted civilization reach the stars on their own. He remembered Nari. Not this Nari, but the one who would travel back with him. Engineer Nari Choi. Brilliant and determined. Who would design half the technology the architects left behind? Who would stand with him for thousands of years, building a future for species that didn't exist yet? And he remembered the end. The breach, finding them even in the distant past. The terrible decision to collapse the timeline, to erase themselves from existence to seal the threat forever. The last moments before activation, knowing they would become nothing more than myths and mysteries, he remembered it all. Past, present, and future, collapsed into a single moment of understanding. When Teho opened his eyes, he was still standing at the gate, but everything had changed. The arsenal was fully active now. The entire planet transformed into a working military base. Ships that had been dead metal for 50,000 years were powering up. Weapons emerged from underground silos. Defense systems came online, scanning the sky for threats that no longer existed. "It's all functional," one of the scientists whispered in awe. "Every system, every weapon, every piece of technology. It's all working as if it were brand new." Teho turned to face the assembled observers. He knew his eyes were glowing with the same light as the arsenal. He could feel the power at his fingertips, the ability to destroy worlds or create them. "I remember," he said quietly. "I remember everything." A hologram appeared in the center of the gathering. It showed Teho himself, but older, wearing the uniform of an architect commander. The future Teho that he was remembering being. "If you're seeing this," the hologram said, "then the loop is stable. The timeline holds. You know what comes next, because you've already done it." The assembled species watched in stunned silence as the hologram continued. "In 180 years, Earth will develop time bridge technology. The breach will appear, just as we always knew it would, and you will make a choice. Not because you have to, not because destiny demands it, but because when you look at the galaxy, at all the species that exist, at all the life and beauty and potential, you won't be able to let it die." The hologram gestured to the activated arsenal around them. "This is your inheritance, but also your responsibility. The weapons, the ships, the technology, all of it was built for one purpose: to protect the future, not to conquer, not to dominate, to protect. You'll gather volunteers," future Teho continued. "People who understand what you're asking of them. They'll go back with you, knowing they'll be erased from history. They'll do it anyway, because some things are worth more than being remembered." The hologram looked directly at present Teho. "You'll live for thousands of years in the past. You'll build civilizations, raise species, create wonders that will last long after you're gone. You'll make friends among beings that don't exist in your native time. You'll watch them grow and flourish. And when the time comes, You'll give it all up to keep them safe. Is it worth it? The hologram asked, then smiled. You already know the answer. You felt it the moment the arsenal activated. This is who we are. This is who we've always been. Not conquerors, not warriors, gardeners. We plant seeds, knowing we'll never see the harvest. The hologram began to fade. The choice is yours. It always was. But know that whatever you choose, I'm proud of who you became. We all are. Trive my non. We all are. The hologram vanished, leaving silence in its wake. Nari stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. I remember too, she said softly. Not as clearly as you, but enough. I remember building the time bridge. I remember the ships. I remember. She looked at Tejo. I remember choosing to go. Around them, the other observers were processing what they had witnessed. Some looked awed. Others frightened. Inquisitor Krell looked like his entire worldview had been shattered. Counselor Vexra was the first to speak. This changes everything. The architects weren't just your ancestors. They were you. Are you. Will be you. The time loop, one of the scientists breathed. It's not just stable. It's self-fulfilling. Humans become the architects because they discovered they were the architects. The loop has no beginning and no end. Tejo looked at his hands. They were steady now, no longer shaking. The genetic memories had fully integrated. He was still himself, but he was also someone who had lived for thousands of years and made impossible choices. The Council needs to make a decision, Ambassador Jiho said, about humanity's place in the galaxy, about access to this technology. Vexra looked around at the activated arsenal, at the power that could reshape civilizations. I think the decision is already made. This technology responds to humans alone. It was built by humans, for humans, to be used when humans are ready. We have no right to deny you your inheritance, but we do have the right to ask questions, Krell said, his voice tight. In 180 years, you'll leave. You'll take volunteers back in time to become the architects. What happens to the rest of humanity? What happens to Earth? Tejo considered this. The memories provided some answers. Earth continues. Humanity continues. We don't take everyone. Just those who volunteer. Most humans will never know this happened. They'll continue to grow, to develop, to build their own future. And when they reach the stars 30,000 years from now, they'll find a galaxy full of friends, never knowing their ancestors prepared the way. That's the beauty of it, Isul said, her voice full of wonder. The architects didn't want worship or recognition. They wanted their descendants to succeed on their own merits, to stand as equals among the species they uplifted, not as masters. The council reconvened on the ships in orbit 3 days later. Tejo and Nari attended. But they were different now. The genetic activation had changed them, made them more than they were, but not less human. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would be granted full council membership. Earth would have access to the architect arsenal, though with the understanding that the weapons would be used only for defense. The tomb worlds would be preserved as heritage sites, open to all species. But more than that, the galaxy had learned a truth that changed everything. The mysterious architects weren't strangers. They were family. The humans walking among them were the children of the beings who had given the galaxy its civilization. 6 months later, Tejo and Nari stood in a museum on Earth, looking at an exhibition of human artifacts from 50,000 years ago. Primitive tools, cave paintings, simple pottery. Look at this, Nari said, pointing to a small clay figurine. It was crude, barely recognizable as human. But etched into its base was a pattern that looked strangely familiar. That's Korean folk art, Tejo said slowly. That specific pattern won't be invented for another 48,000 years. Nari smiled. Or it was invented 50,000 years ago and forgotten, waiting to be remembered. 2000. Tejo reached out and gently touched the display case. We're already there, aren't we? Somewhere in time, we're already doing this. Building the past to create the future. Does it bother you? Nari asked. Knowing your whole life is part of a loop? No, Tejo said honestly. Because it's not just a loop. It's a choice we make over and over again. Every time the cycle comes around, someone chooses to go back, chooses to sacrifice everything. It's not fate. It's love. They stood together, looking at the ancient artifact that was somehow both impossibly old and not yet created. Around them, other museum visitors passed by, never noticing the two people who would one day become legends. 180 years, Nari said quietly. That's how long we have before the breach appears. Before we have to choose, Tejo corrected. We don't have to go back. The loop only continues if we choose it. Will you? Choose it? Tejo looked at her, then back at the figurine with its impossible pattern. He thought about Captain Hunseo, about the 3 million volunteers who had jumped backward through time knowing they would be erased. He thought about the 300 species that filled the galaxy now, living and thriving because people in the future had made an impossible choice. Ask me in 180 years, he said with a small smile. But I think you already know the answer. Nari took his hand. So do I. They left the museum together, walking out into the sunlight of Earth. Above them, ships moved across the sky, traveling between the stars. A galaxy full of life and wonder, built on the foundation of sacrifice and hope. Somewhere in time, 50,000 years ago, and 180 years in the future, the loop was already complete. The architects were already at work, already building the civilization that would forget them, already making the choice that would ensure the galaxy survived. And Tejo, walking through the streets of Seoul with Nari beside him, was both just a man living his life and the eternal gardener planting seeds he would never see grow. The loop had no beginning and no end. It simply was, held together by the one force that could bridge time itself, the human willingness to sacrifice everything for a future they would never see. That was the real legacy of the architects. Not their weapons or their technology, but their choice. The choice to care about others more than themselves. The choice to build instead of destroy. The choice to be forgotten if it meant others could be remembered. And as Tejo looked up at the stars, he knew with absolute certainty that when the time came, he would make that choice too. They all would. Because that's what humans did. That's what they had always done. That's what they would always do. They were the architects. Not because they were special, but because they chose to be.